On today's show, day 2 of Houston Rockets training camp, a lot of discussion about Alperen Sengun from head coach Ime Udoka and Fred VanVleet, as well as the man himself, Al P. A lot of Rockets defensive expectations being set, as well as Fred VanVleet's leadership on full display for this young Rockets team. Jae'Sean Tate as a Swiss Army knife, and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short roll. Oh, my, that's the no-look.
Jabari for 3 and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari.
No!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Ime Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, Frank from the Rockets Chop Shop. You can track down on Twitter at FTank58, and be sure to follow along at HTX Chop Shop for all of the incredible Houston Rockets content that they put out over there. Frank, it has been a super busy start to the week for the Houston Rockets, and a very eventful media day, a couple really impressive days of Houston Rockets training camp with so much to talk about. And we're going to have a very heavy focus on Alperen Sengun in today's episode, because Ime had some things to say about Al P, Fred had some things to say about Al P, and of course Al P had some things to say about himself. Right. The three people that we spoke to during day 2 of Houston Rockets training camp. So we're going to get to that. But first things first, man, I want to give you a chance. You know, it's been a very busy 72 hours in the Houston Rockets kind of stratosphere. So to you, what has really stood out to you, through these first few days, media day, the couple days of training camp, your kind of biggest takeaway, or a couple things that have really kind of impressed you or stood out to you so far?
I think the biggest takeaway that I've had is that the culture shift. And this is listening to the media day, all the players speaking about it, obviously Coach Udoka speaking about it, watching some of the clips from their practices, even some of the insight, like I said, the players are giving. It seems like for everybody, there is a huge culture shift and it's something new that they haven't experienced in the past. And indirectly, Coach Udoka sometimes does say things that makes you kind of get a sneak peek at what he thought about the previous regime and some of the ways they do things when he says things like, unteaching bad habits or stripping it down so you can build good habits and things like that. Our players were cultivated under a lot of negative circumstances that has led to us having 3 terrible seasons in a row. And I think that's one thing that I've taken away from it. It's kind of humbled me on the process as well, because you hear guys like Fred talking about teaching the fundamentals to the guys, like having to teach basketball 101. And so it's, I'm excited, but also it does kind of make you kind of temper your expectations of the team, because the way they're talking, like, it almost seems like they have to go to like the roots and build from there. But it is an exciting process. And I think this is something that Fred alluded to when he was talking about his book, is like understanding and loving the process of building. And I think that when these guys really buy into that, of focusing on doing things the right way, learning how to be a pro, it's going to change the culture. But it starts from what they're doing right now. I love it. I mean, I love the sprints, on the misses on the free throws that Ime does. Conditioning, you could tell the old guys are over it because they're all like dragging in the back. And, the young guys are trying to, win the race and all that. All that stuff is great, man. Referees at the practices, during the scrimmage. It's just so much. It's refreshing. I'm really, really excited. And I think that regardless of how they start, this season. This is what you want to see, that foundational brick by brick laying the house they're trying to build.
Absolutely, right? Because you don't want to try and build, the identity that you want for this team. You don't want Ime to try and establish his vision for this team on a shaky foundation, right? That would be the worst possible case. Is he comes in and he starts throwing, these advanced concepts at these guys right out of the gate, and he's like, and it just doesn't work because it'd be like a house of cards, right? It'd all come tumbling down because maybe some of the veterans pick it up. Maybe, a couple of the young guys are like, okay, I kind of understand what's going on, but you need that strong structural foundation. And it really does feel like that's exactly what they've done, right? They've stripped this thing down to the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
They are going to build these guys up and give them the fundamentals and the structure that has been sorely missing for the past 2 years. And you're absolutely right. And I really don't think Ime's doing it like consciously. I think he's just so flabbergasted by how bad things were for 2 years. He's like, after day one of media, when he was like, yeah, let's face it, it was really ugly the last few years. Like, it's just, he's so candid in his comments where it's just like, he's really not trying to take shots. It's just facts is what it is. Like, this organization was kind of a dumpster fire for a few years, and he's the guy who has to come in with his mop and bucket and try to clean the whole thing up. So I do agree with you. I think the culture shift is so apparent, like being in and around these guys through media day, through a couple days of training camp now, it feels so incredibly different than it has ever felt over the last 2 to 3 years of me being around this team, right? It really feels like a legitimate basketball team. It feels like a professional organization where there's expectations, where there's, again, a sense of urgency, desire from these players, from the coaches, expectations of understanding, hey, we're going to be doing things a different way now. And, again, it does start from the top, right? Ime is the guy in charge of setting that tone, and he's got the right guys to help him do that. I know one of the things that we wanted to, discuss and highlight here is Fred VanVleet. And, he was brought in to be a leader for this team. And one of the things that he did is apparently on media day, before the players started doing their, all their media day circus shenanigans, all that stuff, and talking with us and everything, Fred bought like kind of gift bags for everybody on the team. And he loaded up these like duffel bags with a bunch of stuff. Like, I mean, he got them like the goggles, like the advanced, like, whatever. He got them like beats, cards, all sorts of, swag, all sorts of cool stuff. And he included in that bunch, a book, the Chop Wood Carry
Water. Yeah.
And in that, he kind of discussed, right, and you kind of alluded to this already, he kind of discussed the premise of the book is the idea of falling in love with the process of becoming great, right? And that it's not an overnight process. It's something that takes time, and kind of teaching those lessons to the young guys, right? Understanding that, hey, everything is sunshine and roses right now. First day of training camp, everybody's happy, excited. But when the going gets tough, right? When you're in the middle of the season, when you maybe have a few bad losses in a row, when you hit that adversity, how do you respond? And he is saying and doing all of the right things that you would want out of the guy that you brought in, that you committed all that money to be a leader for this team, right? Can you even remotely imagine, Frank, James Harden saying that kind of thing? Like, it wouldn't happen, right? You can't even comprehend it because it doesn't make sense.
Wait, what book would James Harden have? Eat wings, throw dollars.
Oh man, I wish I was at home so I could hit the oh my button on the soundboard.
You're spot on. You're spot on with everything you said. I think Fred is like the fact that he's buying into this leadership role, and it's not fake. You could tell this is who he is. I don't know the circumstances like fully and what happened in Toronto between him and Scotty Barnes and all that, but I think the humility our players are approaching this because they understand the other side, and they've been on the other side of the tracks as far as losing and being looked at as one of the worst teams in the league. And to me, the most impressive answer that Fred gave was the one where I think it was Fagan. Somebody asked him about what made you choose Houston, and over other teams that have better records, better players. You don't have a co-star here. Why'd you come here? And his response was that, who am I to say that I'm better than any team when I came from a team that didn't make the playoffs? And we didn't make the playoffs. And he doesn't see himself as a player that is too proud to go to any team. And I think that approach is just a breath of fresh air and coming into our locker room. Now, as far as with the gifts, I mean, with you making 43 M's a year, brother, hey, you could afford a couple of beats and some stuff like that. But no, I think, Coach Udoka alluded to him pulling guys aside in training camp, while talking to them, mentoring them, being an extension of the coaching on the floor. He talked about Jeff Green in the same light, saying that also Jeff is a guy that you can lean on. All of this is really, really good stuff. And I think for them, it's just laying those foundational things, because these kids that we drafted over the past few years, for them and to really take the team to the next level, it's going to come from Jalen, Jabari, Tari, Sengun. Fred and them are going to be good, but I think Stones talked about it. Ime talked about it. Internal development is going to get us to where we need to go. And I think Fred, and he spoke to, is looking at the big picture of everything, not just right now. What can we do right now to get these kids ready? So when it's time to get to that level, we've prepared them enough collectively, because it serves everybody well when they can do that.
Absolutely. And I will say, I believe, and I know it was actually the Podfather himself, one of our weekly co-hosts, Ben Dubose, who asked that question of
Facts.
Fred, right? And I thought that was a really great question of Fred. Again, every answer that Fred gives, you can really tell he's bought in, right? He's so genuine. And I heard this from Sean Woodley over at Locked on Raptors and other people who cover the Toronto Raptors, saying that Fred is one of the best, most candid interviews you'll ever get. He doesn't pull any punches. He doesn't hide things. He doesn't sugarcoat stuff. He tells it straight. He tells it how it is. And so far, that's been the case, right? And I'm really excited to see how he kind of navigates this season, because there's going to be some ups and downs, right? There's going to be some bumps in the road, some growing pains. And Fred is going to be a straight shooter the whole time. And that's exactly the kind of leader you need for this team, because, hey, if it was James Harden, man, Frank, those duffel bags would have just been filled with singles, and he would have been like, we're hitting the club tonight. Let's go. Some honey buns, right? Absolutely. I will say too, I think that coming up, we're definitely going to get into the Alperen Sengun stuff as well. So much to tackle there. A lot of discussion about Alperen Sengun from today, from all three guys, from Ime, from Fred, and then we also spoke to Alp himself. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Look, you got to check out Bird Dogs for the best, most comfortable shorts that you will ever own. Look, I've been in Lake Charles covering training camp for all of 2 days so far, and I'm already kicking myself because I own 4 pairs of Bird Dogs and I forgot to pack a single one. And I'm so upset because now I don't have these comfortable, versatile shorts to wear, right? You can wear them running around out and about. I could wear them to Rockets practice and it would be totally fine because they're comfortable. They look great. Again, wear them for any occasion, right? I could wear them to Rockets practice. You can wear them hanging out with friends, beach party, pool day, swim in them. Wear them out on a date if you want to. The most versatile shorts that you will ever own. You got to go check them out. I promise you, you won't want to take them off. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter promo code LockedOnNBA at checkout, and you'll get a free Bird Dogs water bottle with every single order that you place. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. I promise you that. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Be sure to stay tuned in throughout the rest of this week. We got you covered for all of the training camp coverage, footage, everything, as I am here in beautiful, sunny Lake Charles. Get me out of here, man. I want to go home already. I miss my city. I am not a big Lake Charles fan, man.
It is raining. It's raining over here. So it's been Houstoning in Houston right now. So.
Got it. All right. Houston going to Houston. All right. So Frank, day 2 of media, a lot of focus was shifted towards Alperen Sengun and a lot of questions that Ime was asked. And even it's actually kind of funny because there were moments where Ime and then Fred were asked questions that weren't specifically about LP, but some of their answers kind of came back towards Alperen Sengun, almost like subconsciously, where they were just like talking about things like defensive effort and expectations for the defense and all that. I think with Ime, he said a few different things, right? He talked about holding guys holding Sengun accountable, talking about the assistant coaches, talking about the other players on the floor, and just kind of talking about the fact that whether it's physical, whether it's mental, they have expectations for Sengun on the defensive side of the basketball, and he wants both Sengun and Jalen. He wasn't just singling out Sengun. He talked about this in regards to Jalen as well. Yeah. He wants them to be able to play on both ends of the court, right? He knows what he said that term well-rounded at his intro presser. He said it at media day. He said it time and time again. He wants these guys to be well-rounded. So, and he highlighted the fact that with Sengun, I don't think there's no excuse this year, Frank, right? Like last year, there were excuses across the board, because you could maybe point to Sengun and you could try to scapegoat him and be like, oh, well, Shingun's the reason the Rockets defense is bad. Well, no, the whole team was awful on defense.
Yep.
But going from last year to this year, there's going to be, there are no more excuses, because now you have a coach who is actually going to coach and put in, schemes and actually, provide the structure that is needed for a team to have the success that they want to have. You brought in the veteran pieces in Fred and Dillon, guys who are plus defenders on the floor, right? Who are going to help this team get back to a place where they're playing good defense. And so for me, I think this year is going to be so interesting for Alperen Sengun, because Ime even said that he has seen lesser athletes figure it out on the defensive side of the court, right? There are no excuses. You can't point to LP and say, oh, well, he's not the tallest or the fastest or the quickest or whatever. People have figured it out defensively before with less than what he has to work with. And that also extends to Jalen and to Jabari and all the young guys on the roster, right? Guys who have more physical gifts and tools than LP does. The expectations across the board are so wildly different this year for defense. And I need Rockets fans to maybe understand that there might be an outcome this year where we just realize, like, Jalen might just be bad at defense, or Sengun might just be bad at defense. And there might not be a world where those guys can actually succeed on that end, but they are going to be given every chance to succeed on that end of the floor this year. And that's the important takeaway, is Ime is now putting them in the best position to succeed by breaking things down, getting back to the fundamentals. And he's talked about the fact that right now, all they're doing is switching. They're switching 1 through 5, and they're even having Sengun do that. And you talk about how different that is from last year, where Steven Silas only ran Sengun in drop coverage. It's the only, and he even was on the record as saying it's the only coverage I'm comfortable playing Sengun in. And right now, the complete polar opposite of that, Ime is playing him in a switching scheme right now, because that's what everybody's doing, 1 through 5. And when I asked Ime if he's comfortable with Alperen Sengun in a switching scheme, his answer, the exact opposite of Silas. He goes, I wouldn't say I'm comfortable with it, but it's what we are doing. And that just speaks volumes about the fact that he is willing to get out of his own comfort zone, that he's willing to put his players out of their own comfort zone to try and experiment, to try and see what this roster can be capable of. And it's something that we have been begging for years. And it's so great to finally see it and hear it.
Yeah, I think to his comment about lesser athletes, you think about players like Marc Gasol, who is, one of the, he was a defensive player of the year. He's not Marc Gasol could probably struggle jumping over a phone book. He's, especially later in his career. And what Ime talked about with Sengun, when I think a lot of Rockets fans have posited the point of view that it's a physical limitation, like he needs to jump like Clint Capella or somebody like that to be a great defender. When, to me, defense is a lot of IQ and anticipation. And Coach Udoka pointed that out, that if you're such a savant, you're such a high IQ offensive player, there should be no reason why you can't figure it out on defense. You know what I mean? And I think that's what he was alluding to when he said it's a mentality. It really is. It's really focusing that all that brain power you have, that you can see the game really intentionally being like that, like you are passing on defense. And it's almost like in football where you have the best quarterbacks know every defense, and they can see it from that angle because there's such high IQ in their sport. And I think Sengun has shown us that he has the IQ for it. Does that translate to defense? And if it doesn't translate, it's not physical. Nikola Vucevic is not as great of an athlete as Alpi is, and he was on the 5th-ranked Bulls defense as a drop big. So it's not. And even to the point that you made about the switching, that is a philosophical shift in teaching, and I love it, because what his rationale was that even though we might not even run this, but I want him to know it, because at least he has a baseline for something that we do. Because if he can switch, then guess what you can do? You're going to be comfortable hard showing. You're going to be comfortable trapping, because you have the mechanics to come out on a switch. And the way Ime Udoka and a lot of these defensive-minded coaches like to switch is they like to shock the defender. Like, you have to switch out aggressively, like where you're just, I'm here. And it's really hard for big men to be able to do that naturally, because they want to drop down. He also pointed out that they kick out the 5 sometimes, which means that when they get an opportunity they do try to hide them on some of their switches when they drop them down with the defender that might maybe cutting or rolling. But the base of their defense is going to be switching, because from switching you can go traps, hard hedges, you can, hard shows. Then from there, you drop, you can do a soft drop, you can do a hard drop, and then you work your way out. Where as Steven Silas was looking at it from throw everything out, the baby with the bathwater. Dame is going off. He has 50 points. Guess what? I'm going to keep dropping. So that's the difference in coaching that we're going to see is just common sense, putting guys in position to be successful, stripping it down and teaching fundamental. We'll start from level A, then build upon that so that you feel comfortable and you're knowledgeable about things. I think it's like I said, just the competence that they're going to come in with. I'm going to lower my expectations from them. I've seen that Reggie Bullock. I think he's official now. Is that correct, Jackson?
Yeah, they made it officially official.
Okay, so he's official now. I think that's a great pickup. But I think I'm going to lower my expectations because I think these kids have so much to learn. But you have to invest in this year, and this has always been my view personally. This year is a learning year. They're going to win some games, but this year is a learning year. It's going to pay off in the next 2-3 years. So this is the year you invest the process. Like this is the year where you chop wood and carry water. And so they have to learn to do that. And I think that's almost poetic to that's what Fred is giving to all the players. This is the year that it happens. So I think that's what they just need to focus on, just getting the grind of learning how to be NBA players.
They've gone from Sakuda coins to chop wood, carry water. I love it, man. I could not be happier right now from NFTs to actual life lessons.
I'm waiting for that lawsuit. Whatever happened to the Sakuda experience?
Oh, dude, I really don't know at this point. I hope it wasn't like Fire Festival where people invested too much money in it. But we digress. And Frank, I fully agree with you, right? Like, we have high expectations. We have a lot of optimism for this year, more optimism than we've had in the previous 3 years combined, honestly. But at the same time, it could be very reminiscent, right? I need people to remember when Ime took over the Boston Celtics, that was a team that had been to the Eastern Conference Finals, right? That was a team that had playoff success that he inherited from Brad Stevens. And they struggled in the beginning because Ime, it takes a minute. Even if you're a well-established coach, even if you are a high-quality coach, it takes a minute for a group of players, for a group of individuals to understand and absorb the lessons and the philosophies that you're trying to teach them, right? And so not only is he trying to teach this group those philosophies, those lessons, he's having to also, again, have them unlearn the poor behaviors, the bad behaviors of the previous 2 years in some circumstances, right? For the guys who have been here. So it's a lot on Ime's shoulders. But if anybody can handle this challenge, I really do think it's him. I think he is the most well-equipped person for this task. And I fully agree with you. This is a kind of a transformational year for the organization. Hopefully there's some success. Hopefully there's, a play-in tournament trip down the line, because we would be ecstatic and over the moon if that's the case, if you're playing meaningful basketball in April for the first time in a long time. But that shouldn't be the barometer for success of this year, right? You've still got to measure it based on development, how the guys are progressing, all of that. And again, Ime is the guy I think that's going to be able to accomplish that. Coming up, we're going to get into some more of the takeaways from day 2 of training camp. We'll hear from some of the things that Alperen Sengun discussed, including, I know we've been focused on defense, but he had some thoughts on his offense as well. We're going to get to that and so much more here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into some NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets, $200 guaranteed when you place just a $5 bet with FanDuel. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. Right now, you can take a look at the outright betting favorites for Super Bowl 58. The Kansas City Chiefs, shout out to Taylor Swift's team of choice, plus 550 to win it all. San Francisco 49ers also at plus 550. You got the Eagles at plus 650. And rounding out the top 5, you have the Bills and the Cowboys plus 700 and then plus 850. So for all those odds and so much more, be sure to check out FanDuel and use code LOCKEDON to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, I know we said we'd shift the gears to the offense here for a second, but there was one more kind of quote from Fred that I wanted to revisit here where even Fred was, kind of discussing the defensive philosophies, right? Kind of the approach that they're taking in some of their teaching so far through training camp. And he was talking about Alperen Sengun and the fact that Alpe's not just going to sit in a drop like he's used to, that they are, experimenting, that they're trying different things. And he went on to say that he's, throwing out all these different looks, right? Where he's like, we'll see Jeff and Jabari and Jock all at the 5, different looks, different things that they're going to be able to achieve with various lineups. And I do very much think that this is going to be a situation where, again, all the points that we're making about Sengun and being given the tools for success now on the defensive end, all of these still apply to Jalen. They apply to Jabari. They apply to Tari. They apply to all the young guys on the roster, not just Sengun. It's just that Jalen and Jabari don't also have that kind of like excuse of, oh, well, maybe there's some physical limitations or whatever, right? Jalen is a 99th percentile athlete, and he should be able to find a way to be effective defensively. Jabari was projected to be a plus defender coming into the NBA, and he struggled last year. So now the expectations have shifted for him. So across the board, this is a team that is going to be finally put into a position of success on defense. And I think that I need Rockets fans to, again, kind of brace themselves a little bit, because there may be some struggles early on. And if that's the case, don't be surprised if Ime kind of goes with a short leash for some of these guys, where maybe Jalen's struggling defensively and he benches Jalen for Reggie Bullock, or, Sengun's struggling, so he goes to Jock Landale, or he shifts to Jabari at the 5 and goes to that, 1 through 5 switch everything lineup with a little bit more defensive versatility. There's just a lot of directions that this can kind of go. And Ime, again, has to straddle the fence between development and giving these guys the run that they need, but also being a competitive team that wants to win basketball games.
Yeah, and there was a quote that he kind of just threw out, where he said that he was not looking forward, but he expected competition between Kevin Porter and Jalen Green to play. Like, that was a thing, and I suspected that may be a thing. And Stone had kind of said something along the lines of, these past few years, we've given young guys a lot of opportunities to play, but now when you're trying to win, it's a different approach to minutes and like who gets to play, who gets to finish, all that stuff. I say all that to say that, yeah, what you said is exactly right. Like, when you're developing, the incentive to play players isn't success, but when you're trying to be successful, it does impact like the decision making you make on your roster. Like, they're not going to let Jabari just be trash for like 40 games out the year, because he wouldn't play. They'll just put somebody else that can do better than he can in, and that goes for every single player. I don't think that he did, point out that he's not really looking at, I think somebody brought up about the minutes with Sengun. Is it going to impact him? It might have been you. His minutes. He said not his minutes per se, but they want to see that mentality shift. And for all these guys, it has to be a mentality. Defense is a mindset that you have to have and be intentional about. And for Jalen, from some of the film, Jalen is still struggling on his reaction time off ball. He's always a tick late making his switches or helping. On ball, he's one of the best defenders. Off ball, that's where he struggles. So there's going to be a period that Celtics team, up to January, they were like a 500 team. And then from like January, I forgot there was like 13th onwards, they were like one of the best teams in NBA history, like statistical wise. So it's going to take time. Coach pointed it out. Usually, some of the base defense stuff is going to come in first. They'll learn to figure that out. The offense is going to be what comes later, and that deals with a lot of chemistry, figuring out who. And I know we'll talk about the offensive things that we saw from some of the practices, but it's a call for every single player on that team. But you got Dillon Brooks there, Fred VanVleet. The standard is already set. These are dogs. These are guys that aren't gonna slack. If the leaders are working and you're a player or a young guy or a role player that's dragging, it's gonna look stupid. It's gonna look awkward, and the coach and the players aren't gonna take that. So, and Jalen pointed out to it. It's so much like going on right now with this team. And I'm excited to see what really translates, because we're so close to actual real basketball. So, I mean, it's really intriguing. There's so many storylines for the Rockets this year, bro. It's crazy.
I know, absolutely. And when we shift gears now, kind of going to the offensive side of things really quickly, one of the things that Alperen Sengun actually said and discussed is, he was asked about the confidence that he has in shooting the ball. And I thought his answer was so, again, it's all these little, thinly veiled criticisms of the previous coaching staff, because his answer was pretty apparent in the fact that last year the coaches didn't want me to shoot. They told me not to shoot. And so this year, he says, the coaches, my teammates, they're all yelling at me to shoot the ball. And Ime talked about it yesterday at day one, saying that when Alp is open on the perimeter, he needs to be comfortable and confident in shooting the basketball, because he needs to be able to make the defenses pay when he's out on the perimeter like that. So I do think that there is a world now where you've got a coaching staff that is now going to empower Alperen Sengun, even though the expectations are incredibly high, right, defensively, and he has to improve on that end, like everybody does. But I think you finally got a coaching staff now that sees and understands what he can be and what he can bring to the table offensively. And I fully expect that, I've been saying this since back in June, July, around Summer League time, where I understood and I was told, Ime is incredibly excited about Sengun, about his passing ability, about what he can do offensively. He talked about the fact that, again, you don't have to have a traditional, ball dominant guard out there when you have a big that can pass the way Sengun can pass, right? Which tells me that we are definitely going to see some version. I don't know how much we'll see, but we're going to see some, shin hub, some Alperen Sengun as like the fulcrum of the offense at points this season, where they do actually lean into him offensively, which is what we've been begging to see for such a long time. And it's just about, can he get his defense to a level where he's not being benched because of that, so that he can have that opportunity to showcase his skills on the offensive side.
Yeah, I noticed in the practice film that they were using their fives at the top of the key to initiate, and that segment of practice that they were working on with both Sengun and Jeff, and giving them opportunities to get the entry pass and then go into DHO action from there, or just scan the defense and watch for cutters. And I think that is intentional. And I think that package is really going to be for Sengun, where he's going to be that 5 out. And one thing I've noticed about Coach Udoka, he really does love 5 out, even with non-shooters. And ironically enough, there's a video from I think it's called Coach U, with Steven Silas preaching 5 out, like he's doing a coaching clinic about 5 out. And he said, like, one of the concepts, and this is very true, when you have a non-shooter as a 5 at the 5, and you can still space by using them as a screener, because that person that's going to be being screened, the person coming off the screen, especially if it's another 5 guard and LP, they're going to be in drop coverage. Most of the league has those 5s. There's a few guys that switch out good, but even AD plays drop coverage. If you have good shooters like Fred, like Jalen, or guys that can attack bigs, it's an advantage, and you still keep your spacing principles. If they keep dropping, if Alperen can shoot that 3, it takes that whole thing to another level. Then you factor in the fact that he can pass, one of the best passing big men in the league. That 3 ball is really going to unlock like everything for our offense. And I think for him, in order to get to that level, he has to be able to shoot it at a respectable pace. I don't think he's going to be a 38% 3-point shooter this coming season. If he can just sustain 33 to 35%, that to me is enough for them to really see the impact from it. So I think, the shooting definitely needs to be there. I love how they're going to, I know for a fact they're going to use them. A lot of our offensive players aren't great initiators. With Kevin Porter being gone, that is going to be an issue. Finding playmakers, we have we have Fred. Jalen is still learning to be a playmaker. I think after that is Tate, and it kind of falls off from there to a bunch of and you got Dillon to some extent, but it gets real murky after the kind of 2 or 3 guys. So Alperen is going to be called on he needs to be on the court. And that feeds back to our defensive conversation. All of this, I think that's why there's so much emphasis on him this year. The Rockets are counting on him. And I think he's going to be one of the biggest difference makers for the team's success, not only this year, but going forward, if he does hit his potential.
Absolutely. And he did talk about the fact that, so I was told after day one that he was not injured. And I guess technically he wasn't injured, but he had, I guess, some soreness in his ankle, which is why he didn't participate in the end of that practice scrimmage from day one that I wound up posting the footage of. He was off on the side getting some ice treatment done, but apparently he is 100%. He spoke about it When he talked to us during day 2, he said that he had like a small little tweak in his ankle, felt something, and so they just wanted to be cautious with it. He got the treatment, and he was a full participant in day 2 of training camp practice. Didn't feel anything. He was set. So that's good news there. Elsewhere from day 2, we didn't get quite as much scrimmage footage from day 2. They were in the main gymnasium day 1, which is where we got that awesome scrimmage footage from. And then day 2, we saw a little bit of stuff. And you brought up the point, right, of Jae'Sean Tate kind of being one of the offensive initiators. Frank, I don't know how you feel about this, because you and I have talked about Tate in the past. I know we've talked about Tate versus KJ Martin and all this, but I really do think that Tate is going to play a pretty integral role on this team with Ime Udoka. We're already seeing it. He's got playmaking responsibilities in that second unit. We're seeing him being played alongside Ime Thompson at times. And even though that's two essential non-shooters,
nasty stuff. Yeah.
It can be, but what we're seeing is the non-shooters. Guess what? They're moving without the basketball, right? But they're still finding ways to be effective, because you've got a coach who's actually employing some, creativity in what he's doing on the floor. And I do fully expect, Jae'Sean to kind of have that, pseudo facilitator role, where maybe you kind of cobble together some playmaking at times with, one of the lead ball handlers in Fred or Jalen or Amin. And then you also kind of supplement that with some additional playmaking from Alperen Sengun or from Jae'Sean Tate. And we saw him in the day 2 footage, right? Doing some cutting, doing some screening. And I think the biggest thing that stood out is, he's just incredibly physical on the defensive side, right? We've seen him kind of clamp up Fred VanVleet and a couple other guys through a couple days of scrimmage practice. I know it's just training camp. I know it's just practice footage, but that is something that he brings to the table, right? Is an upper level of defense, especially one-on-one, man-to-man defense. He does foul a little bit much, but Jae'Sean Tate's going to be an important part of this team this year. I need Rockets fans to understand that.
Yeah, sadly, no, I'm playing, but he's a coach's pet. Jae'Sean is one of those guys that coaches love. He's gonna hustle. He's gonna go hard in practice. I mean, he's everything. You watch film on him, he's doing everything right fundamentally. I think that's how a guy at his stature makes it to the league and stays in the league. So he's doing what he's supposed to do. At this point, I actually think they need him. Unless they can, if he's going to be included in a trade to get a player that can address some of those issues that the team has. If they are not going to make any moves, then they actually need Jae'Sean Tate to play. And the fact that he's so versatile is going to get him a lot of minutes. I saw that in that lineup that they had out there with him, Tari, Amen. You had Jeff, and I forgot who. I think it was one of the guys from Summer League on there too. I like Jeff at the 5 there. Gives him a bit of spacing. Tari, I saw they try to initiate with him as well, but he kind of still has that tunnel vision stuff. Tate on that second unit can be that kind of point forward to get you into stuff, or at least get the offense in gear, because their offense is really predicated on getting feet in the paint and then drive and kick from there. And that's what it was in Boston, and generating those catch and shoot threes. So I'm curious to see what Tate looks like in a winning context. Like, I actually feel like he's a positive player, that if you are on a winning team, the plays that he makes, the type of style of basketball he plays will add value to your team. Whereas on a team that's tanking, it seems just like, you're just doing too much right now. So I'm curious to see. I think if my theory is correct, he may change the mind of a lot of fans that are ready to see him go, where you'll see his value. I think Tate does have value in the NBA. Hopefully he gets to show us something this year. He still needs to be able to shoot. At the end of the day, all that stuff I just said, if Tate he can't be a 30% three-point, whatever it was this year, he still has to be able to shoot, especially from the corners. If he can hit those corner threes, like that's like the base. Just be a 35% corner three-point shooter. Then he's going to get more. But we are lacking shooting right now. I think Bullock addresses a little bit, but even I know you like that second unit. Looking at it on the court, it is kind of concerning as far as Amen, Tate, Tari. It gets a little nasty, but I think we'll see how that goes. I'm just curious to see what type of combinations Coach Udoka puts out.
Yeah, it's definitely going to have to be a thing where you're going to have to stagger some of those lineups, because if you were to just throw in the base 5 of the bench all at the same time, Reggie Bullock's the one shooter of that bunch, right? And then so that's not enough. He's not a good enough shooter to make up for 4 duds in the second lineup, unfortunately. But Ben Sullivan's got his work cut out for him, of course, with all the kind of, quote unquote non-shooters on the roster. He'll be, incredibly busy handling that this season, getting those guys up to speed. One quick little story here before we wrap things up from day 2 of camp, a fun little interaction, if you will. So we set things up and we're doing the interviews and we're recording everything. And I was, shout out to local station back in Houston, KHOU. I was helping them kind of get some of their content. So I was holding the microphone, not doing my usual iPhone recording setup. And that allowed me the opportunity to capture some extra B-roll because I set up my phone off on the side to capture some extra B-roll of them, going through the free throw drills. And then at one point, Tari and Ime are playing one-on-one on the same hoop they were doing the free throw drills on. So if you've watched the footage published to the YouTube channel, you see that. And there's a moment where Tari starts to, kind of put the moves on Ime, and he goes into a step back 3. And Tari was doing this thing where he was kind of clowning around in practice where he would pull for a 3, a step back, and then he would do that little, he would do like a back pedal, like 10 feet back and kind of like a little quick stutter step. And the man backpedaled directly into my tripod and just completely knocked it off its stand, crashed into it. He did not hurt himself. There is no Tari Eason injury report to be had here. I will not be shamed into this, but it was hilarious because we're in the middle of interviewing Al P when we heard kind of the crash off to our right, and we all turned our heads, and Tari looked like a kid who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar because he was holding the tripod and his eyes were so wide. He was like, "Whose is this? What did I do?" It was so funny. And thankfully somebody walked over and just got the tripod and hit end on my video. But I was not able to publish the full crash, but it was very funny, and it was at least worth me bringing up on the show. So that will be lost to the ether, but I just wanted to share that little moment because it was pretty hilarious. But
yeah, the background, very interesting background footage from Kelly Eco as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
and just it was good. That looked fun though, man. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Gotta go check out the footage and be very observant of all the things happening in the background from the player interviews and the B-roll footage and all that good stuff. So be sure to go check that out if you haven't yet. But Frank, do us all a favor, let everybody know where they can track you down at, man.
Rockets Chop Shop, man. Y'all tap in with us. This year is gonna be fun.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give us your thoughts and takeaways through a couple days of training camp, media day, all that good stuff about your Houston Rockets. What excites you the most? What worries you the most about this team? Let me know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.